Alright, so I finally remade the best of every Smash Ultimate move like everybody requested I did once DLC wrapped up, and it's gone over really well. So naturally, the next thing people want is the worst of every Smash Ultimate move remake. Yeah, I want it too, considering that the worst of video performed much better than the best of video last time I did them. So I sat down to make the new worst of list, but between DLC characters generally being pretty good and patches tending to focus more on buffs than nerfs, I didn't feel there was nearly enough change to be up to the standards of a main channel video. But enough has still changed, either from character patches and DLC or just my own opinions changing, that I think it is absolutely a topic worth revisiting, so we're gonna do a bit more of a kind of retrospective / post-mortem thing today. I think there will likely be some spoilers for the new best of every Smash Ultimate move video here, so if you haven't seen that one yet, you may want to check it out first before you watch this one.
Picture a randomized character with any combination of other attacks and attributes. They're about to spin a wheel to select their final attack, but before that, they're allowed to strike one move off the wheel to guarantee they won't get it. Repeat for many random characters, which move gets struck most often. Anything that uses mana, ineligible. Command inputs, ineligible.
So similar to the updated best of list, we're not doing this anymore. We're allowing all kinds of character-specific resources with the caveat that they would have some kind of relative balancing factor, right? The example that I used was maybe if you're Steve, each pickaxe material is available for the same amount of time as it would be in an average Steve match if you were mining it manually. Obviously, there are some situations where that starts getting fuzzier than others. The purpose of this is not to be some kind of brain-melting, ultra-technical specification. It's just to put you in the right mindset. No multi-character mechanics, no superform character states, and no special cancel moves. Those are the only major restrictions we're using this time.
A surprising amount of people wanted throws covered last time, but I mean, this one's good because it keeps you close, this one's bad because it sends you far, this one's good again because it sends you really far.
Wow, how amazing and interesting too.
I really like that edit. Last time in the updated best of list, I did include throws. I will not be doing that here. I'm sorry, I don't care if your up throw kills at 385% versus 386%. Just, I'm not doing that. The same applies to a lot of the other kind of bonus categories, but I will likely look at some of them.
Jabs overall rarely play more than a filler close combat role in a character's kit, but it's fair to expect them to do more than Samus's 1-2 that's really just a 1. Bizarrely, the 2 hits of this jab don't actually combo into each other, even at high percent, so your actual jab is just this.
So, Samus's jab is kind of notoriously awful and has been for years at this point. The thing is though, it is still at least frame 3, which means it does at the very least perform the role of being like a panic button in close range. You're certainly not getting any kind of insane follow-up off of it. Hell, you're not even getting like a standard follow-up. It's all mix-ups after that point, but it has something to do. Wario's jab, on the other hand, comes out at frame 8 and still doesn't have very good range and still doesn't have very good payoff, so worst jab definitely goes to Wario's jab in retrospect. As for why I didn't make the cut the first time around, I literally just didn't know the thing existed. That was a straight up oversight on my part. Nowadays, this definitely would never slip through the cracks, largely because ultimateframedata.com is a thing and it makes it really easy for me to check every single move that I'm evaluating, which I often do. But yeah, last time Wario's jab was literally just not even on my radar, so that was my bad.
Forward tilts are usually fairly straightforward moves, but the one I've chosen here is actually one of the least straightforward ones, in this case to his detriment. Bayonetta's Kick Flurry has solid damage output and range, but is also horribly slow. These attacks tend to kill as compensation for their poor startup, something that Bayonetta will essentially never be able to do. Worst of all though, while the kicks suit her origin game and certainly look flashy, they also give opponents plenty of opportunities to pop right out, which gives the attack an abysmal risk-reward ratio between that, the slow startup, and its very poor safety on shield.
Bayonetta's forward tilt got buffed in a patch. It didn't get a lot more reliable, but its reliability was slightly improved, still nothing particularly great there. But a much more significant change was that it now actually works as a combo starter at lower percents because its end lag was reduced, which also makes it a little bit safer. Not patched enough to make it a good forward tilt. I wouldn't trade most forward tilts in the game for it, no matter what kind of character I was, but I would trade Jigglypuff's forward tilt for it. So Jigglypuff's forward tilt has some stuff going for it. It's actually relatively quick and it's one of the safest forward tilts on shield in the game, but that's because it's not even really a forward tilt. It's got jab range. So you're kind of trading out your forward tilt for a second jab, except it's a frame 7 jab, and it doesn't really kill, and it doesn't really have any kind of payoff whatsoever. That sound like a trade-off essentially any other character would want to make? I gotta say no. Robin's forward tilt really sucks too, but at least it's a disjoint. Olimar's predictably sucks as a non-Pikmin move, but at least least it's got some kill power behind it. Jigglypuff's does essentially nothing.
Down tilts are typically solid or even excellent attacks, so much so that even after combing through every single one on the roster, I couldn't find a genuinely awful one. Does Jigglypuff's 2-frame? No. Does it start combos? No. Does it work as a poke in the neutral game? Kind of, but its poor range and speed leave a lot to be desired there. While it does send at a very low angle, that's not nearly the same kind of payoff other difficult to land down tilts provide, and its kill power isn't anything to write home about.
Yeah, if I were to make a list of like the overall most important moves on most characters' kits, down tilt would almost certainly be in the top 5, whereas Jigglypuff, she's an air-based character. She's intentionally not supposed to have very good grounded moves, and down tilt is just garbage. Like, I honestly think I was too charitable to it in the original video. The one vague use case it has is if you have your opponent cornered, you can down tilt them to send them at a pretty harsh angle. Sure, but that's a niche situation, and down tilts are not supposed to be niche moves. They're staple tools for most characters.
It's Ganondorf. Up tilt goes to Ganondorf. And let's just skip ahead for a moment. Neutral B also goes to Ganondorf. I think these choices should be pretty self-explanatory, but if you're interested in more detail, I'd recommend checking out this video, which goes over these kinds of big, powerful moves.
Obviously, both those moves suck. I don't think anyone's gonna argue with that. Actually, no, I take that back. I definitely had people argue with me about that. A much more reasonable argument I got, though, was that Falcon Punch should actually take the title over Warlock Punch here, because realistically, you shouldn't be using either of these moves in like a general neutral or even advantageous kind of setting. Pretty much the only reliable use case for either of those would be shield breaks, and since Warlock Punch kills earlier than Falcon Punch, it's a better shield break punish. And nowadays I actually agree with that argument, and I would give the title to Falcon Punch, which makes me very sad to do, but yeah, it's the worst neutral special in the game. This doesn't apply to any of the other arguments I got, like, no, I don't care that Warlock Punch has armor on it, that's pretty much just a non-issue, but the shield break thing, yeah, that's pretty legit. As for up tilt, it's still Ganondorf, and honestly, nothing else even comes close. To be fair, up tilt is the best it's been in a very long time in Ultimate, but that's like choosing what the best console is to play Balan Wonderworld on.
Quick dash attacks tend to be good or at least well-worn moves, where slow ones tend to be used very sparingly, and King Dedede's is the slowest Ultimate has to offer, which I also think makes it the worst. Now, in the context of Dedede's particular moveset, that's not necessarily the case. Because he specializes in traps, especially at the ledge, he actually gets a surprising amount of use out of the famous belly flop. Very few characters would have access to anywhere near the ledge pressure that Goros provide, and while there may be a rare configuration which would prefer this to a more standard dash attack, I think for the majority of characters, giving up a burst movement option would be a heavy cross to bear.
So this was probably my single most contentious choice of the video. I got a lot of comments arguing against it. This time around, in retrospect, I'd actually give the title to King Dedede. Okay, so yes, Marth and Lucina have bad dash attacks. Link and Hero have bad dash attacks, but they are dash attacks. They do what dash attacks are supposed to do. You can envision scenarios on certain characters where someone's at the very tip of your range and the only thing that's going to hit them is dash attack. King Dedede cannot say this. Nothing about this actually works like a dash attack. He functionally does not have a dash attack. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Snake's Mortar Launcher up smash, for example. Even though it didn't make my top moves list for a second time, it's still quite a good move, even though it really doesn't function anything like a particularly traditional up smash. And that's because even though he's trading off quite a bit, he's getting quite a bit in return. So what does King Dedede get in return? Well, he gets a very slow, very unsafe, powerful kill option, which typically tend to range from mediocre to terrible. But the other thing he gets is a good 2-frame move, like legitimately quite a good 2-frame move. Is it so much of a better 2-frame move compared to what most characters would have access to anyways, though, that it's worth essentially giving up an entire move slot for? In my opinion, no. It's not. 2-frame tools in general aren't really in that short supply. A lot of down airs, down tilts, down smashes will fulfill that role, whereas dash attack, you really only get one dash attack. There are some ground moves that can kind of step in and fill that role instead. Marth having a bad dash attack doesn't really matter that much because forward tilt does the same thing, but they're in much shorter supply. So the trade-off essentially becomes give up an entire move for a slightly upgraded version of a tool you're probably going to have anyways, and as far as I'm concerned, that's not a good trade-off. Reminder, this is in a vacuum. If we're looking at the moves in context, no, Dedede's dash attack is absolutely not the worst. Yeah, editing MockRock here, I say that, and yet this thing is still really trying my patience, trying to find a modern, in-context clip of Dedede's dash attack actually doing what it's supposed to do took forever. ever.
And our contender for Forward Smash continues along a similar theme. Snake's RPG Blast is incredibly strong, but also incredibly slow, and Snake squeezes use out of it in a way that most characters couldn't. It's only 1 frame slower than King Dedede's Hammer Swing, which was also heavily considered, but lacks that move's sweet spot punch and aerial coverage, with the loss of Sour Spots not being nearly enough to compensate. Ultimate has plenty of other forward smashes with only a bit less payoff, but dramatically better frame data, and faster but weaker smash attacks often play a role in whiff punishing, which is something that Snake can almost never do.
So everything I said there is still pretty much true, but there is one important consideration that I wasn't really taking into account at the time, and that's that after you get the RPG charged, releasing it from the charge animation takes very little time, which means that it is actually a pretty good 2-frame tool. And I know I just finished going on a rant about how 2-frame tools aren't that useful with my criteria, and I stand by that, but the thing is, there are actually other forward smashes which are comparable to Snake's in a lot of areas, but don't have this benefit, including King Dedede's, who I'd actually give the title to now. Snake's nearly instant charge release also gives him some other benefits in different setups, whereas King Dedede's forward smash, you basically just kind of have to time it and wing it and hope that it works out. It does provide better aerial coverage, so in like corner situations, you can stop your opponent from jumping out in a way that Snake can't quite match, and you might also accidentally catch some anti-airs, no way you're doing it on reaction, so it's not like a strict black and white kind of deal which one of these moves is better. I should say worse. But I think a lot of the strengths of DDD still keep it firmly within that, slow but strong, so therefore terrible mentality that a lot of Smash moves kind of tend to get lumped into, whereas Snake does have more going for him. For the record, in my opinion, Snake still does have quite a bad forward smash, and if you're not running like a specifically trap-based setup, I really can't think of a lot of movesets that would even give it a second glance, but I do think it has definitely more going for it than DDD.
Down smashes tend to be some combination of quick, safe, and large. And if you take all of these away, you're left with Wario. While his breakdancing seems to be an attempt to one-up Mario's impressive moves, like most of his efforts, has fallen apart quite badly, and we're left with a limp ground spin with unimpressive range, power, speed, and the unfortunate title of one of the least safe moves in Smash. This attack takes more than a full second to complete, and blocking one hit means you don't need to block the rest, so if Wario's down smash whiffs or is shielded, which is going to happen a lot due to its frame 8 startup and small hitbox, you're about to eat one hell of a punish.
My god, this move sucks, and I actually kind of love that it sucks because it's really flavorful in comparison to Mario's. Mario's kind of doing the controlled break spin and Wario is just completely going overboard and getting out of control. Really cool. I like that detail, but yeah, this move is terrible.
Well, basically all up smashes play at least some role as an anti-air. Even the ones most aggressively tuned in this direction tend to be usable to a certain degree against grounded opponents. This does not apply to Hero. His upward sword stab lacks any meaningful coverage from the blade, as well as losing the grounded launchers similar moves tend to have, meaning that it's strictly limited to use as an anti-air or pressuring opponents on platforms. Against opponents on platforms, you need to position yourself very specifically, meaning that it struggles to cover multiple options in, say, a tech situation. In anti-air territory, the strictly vertical hitbox doesn't cover jumping approaches, and even reasonably strong opponents are rarely going to try and land directly on top of you. It's also essentially useless as an out-of-shield option, which is the other role up smashes tend to play. Hero was in competition for this placement with similarly inflexible up smashes, namely Donkey Kong, the Belmonts, and Isabelle.
Yeah, this one was a little bit funny to give out. People were confused about whether the critical hit, the 1 in 8 chance to do insane damage and knockback, was in place with Hero's up smash. Yes, it would be, because that mechanic is very easy to self-contain within the move, and yet I still feel like it's just that bad. One other common suggestion I got that should have fit on here was Wii Fit trainers. I don't really get that one. It clearly hits grounded opponents, and yeah, even though 1 out of 8 times Hero's up smash just completely cheats for you, who cares? Its use cases are just so narrow.
Alright, let's be honest. Little Mac clearly has the worst aerials. That doesn't make for an overly interesting video though, so we're gonna run this section through for first runner-up. So, from the top. Neutral airs are pretty much all at least solid. Apart from one, there really isn't a legitimately bad move in the bunch. I ultimately had to settle on Olimar. While fairly quick, this move is also tiny, making it a poor option out of shield and a go-to move slot for this purpose. Like most neutral airs, it does act as a combo starter. This only applies to very strict spacings though, and outside of this combo role, unfortunately, its launch angle, knockback, and inconsistent hitboxes give it essentially no functionality either as a kill move or edge guarding tool. Bayonetta was considered because of the extreme landing leg and low kill power of her spin kick, although it's still a large attack that has its role in edge guarding and air-to-air scenarios. Duck Hunt's cartwheel meets the bare minimum standards for a regular neutral air, but does meet them. Zelda's magical spin is notoriously inconsistent, but when it does work, the reward is much higher.
So the Zelda inconsistency thing was actually patched out. I still don't think it connects incredibly reliably. Most multi-hit aerials still have issues with that, but it used to be like really bad. I actually had some people argue with me that Little Mac shouldn't have the worst neutral air title, which I firmly disagree with. The fact that it's frame 2 means nothing if it doesn't do anything else. I didn't just take Little Mac's aerials at face value, I did individually weigh them against every other aerial independently, but I still came to that conclusion without too much issue. As for the second place choice, yeah, I'd still give it pretty handily to Olimar. It's definitely not going to any of the new DLC characters that got released after this video, which is kind of a common theme among why this video hasn't changed as much as the best moves equivalent.
Forward airs of all kinds are often staples of a character's neutral game, and if you're gonna give that up, you'd hope to get something else good in return. Snake's axe kick definitely has a lot of payoff if you land it, but at 23 frames of wind-up, the slowest in Ultimate, this is asking quite a lot, even with Snake's niche trap setups, which most characters wouldn't be able to utilize. While Meta Knight's forward air is underwhelming, Pitts has criminally small hitboxes, and Mr. Game & Watch's can be completely snuffed out, these attacks all still have at least some contribution to the character's game plans.
Mr. Game & Watch is not even really that clear if he should be in the discussion anymore. I still kind of maintain that most characters wouldn't want to give up their forward airs for that bomb drop, but he clearly makes decent use of it. This obviously wasn't a super formal list. I don't use a strict honorable mention system for the worst of list, but I do think that Wii Fit Trainer should have been in the conversation. Meta Knight still would be, even though it got buffed a few times, and I'd actually put Terry here nowadays as well, but the thing is, all of these moves still definitely do things, right? There aren't really any terrible forward airs apart from arguably Snake's and definitely Little Max, which, just as a heads up, is in first place for every aerial. I'm not going to bother mentioning it anymore.
Back airs are again overall great moves, and there aren't any true duds outside of Little Mac, but I think Piranha Plant comes closest. Does it kill? Yes, but that applies to the vast majority of back airs in the game. Does it have a decent hitbox? Yes, but again, the competition is stiff. Still, this move seems at least fine until you try and use it high in the air, when you realize that the animation takes more than a second to finish for no justifiable reason. Hero is in direct contention for the choice due to the higher initial startup of his sword slash, which lacks quite the same raw kill power, but is saved by the move's more generous hitbox, higher safety on shield, and less overall commitment.
This one I still feel pretty good about, and again, it feels a little bit weird to have to give it to anyone, right? You look at Piranha Plants and you're like, oh, okay, well, I mean, it's strong, it's big, it does some stuff. But I remember feeling pretty validated about this at the time because I got a lot of comments going like, no, it can't be Piranha Plant. Look at X and Y thing it does. It's big, it's strong, it does some stuff. But those comments were pretty much never accompanied by a back air that was actually worse. That's how this works, and it's something that I see actually pop up a decent amount on move ranking videos on both my channels. Something needs to go in this slot. Does Piranha Plant's back air have strengths? Yes. Absolutely it does. Are those strengths better than essentially any other back air apart from Max? No, I don't think so, and I think Hero's the only other one that is really competing with.
The vast majority of down airs are some combination of spike, landing hitbox, and stall and fall, and while all of these are relatively specific tools, I think stall and falls are the most specific. Which means the next task is to single one out of the group, and I ended up going with Sonic. Ridley's comes out much faster and kills, Toon Link's has a disjoint and kills, Banjo's is much faster and has a disjoint, Bayonetta's kills and has a much larger hitbox, Bowser's kills and has a disjoint, Corrin's is much faster and sets up easier kamikaze situations, Greninja's has combo potential and bounces off shields along with the Belmonts, Mr. Game & Watch's is much faster, kills and has a disjoint, Sheik is faster, and so is Zero Suit Samus. Also, when I put out a tweet about this video, I predictably had some people bring up Ridley, but I disagree with the reputation this attack has gained. Compared to other stall and falls, it's quite fast at frame 11 and has respectable kill power.
That rapid fire segment took a long time to record. As for the move choice, yeah, okay, it's Ridley. He's below Sonic for one very specific reason though. For all the weaknesses that Sonic's has, it does still send him at a diagonal angle, which means that his coverage on opponents below him is still much better than Ridley can manage. If an opponent overextends and chases someone directly into the air, Ridley's down air is still much better than Sonic's because he can actually get a reversal into a kill off of it. But the thing is, in 2022, people aren't really going to do that at top level anymore. It's questionable how much they were really doing that even at the time, but nowadays I think people have gotten way better at playing around both these moves, in which case Ridley's down air has much less to offer.
For up air, we're going to break our selection criteria a bit and choose King K rule.
So just as a reminder, this does not apply to King K rule anymore. We're getting rid of this criteria entirely, so his armor is completely fair game.
Now, this attack does have its strengths. K roll's head is intangible at the start of the move, he lunges fairly high, and hits pretty damn hard when he manages to swat someone out of the air. If he misses, though, unlike with most up airs, there's no further opportunity to create pressure due to the absurd 71 frames the move takes to finish. This also makes it quite dangerous to try and use near the ground, and it was already one of the least useful landing up airs. I am aware that a lot of people would choose Sonic's scissor kick for this position due to its consistency issues, but even with this in mind, I still consider it a far more versatile and overall usable tool.
You know, I actually just got finished recording an entire segment about how I stand by this choice, but Hero's up air exists. It's really close. Hero's up air has way more use cases than K Rool does, which which is a huge consideration, but it still lets you get very little off it, and it's really specific to land. K-Rolls was actually buffed after this video was made to be made even stronger, which I don't really care about for the most part. Strength was far from its issue, but it would open more viable kill confirm routes, stuff like throws or down airs into up air. So I think I'm gonna give it to Hero over King K. Rool, but it's not by much. Hero's up air is essentially Lucario's already fairly weak up air without any of the potential payoff of Aura. Yeah, that doesn't sound very good.
Having already brought up Warlock Punch, we turn to side special and are greeted with Yoshi trying his best.
Next!
For down B, the chameleon of the special move category, I've sadly once again got to go with a really cool attack, Ridley Skewer. This is another one of these big moves which are awesome to land, but ultimately not particularly practical for obvious reasons. Skewer overall has more utility in setups due to its increased speed, again covered pretty comprehensively in this video if you're interested in further details. Kirby was a contender here, but Stone's ability to bypass many juggling scenarios is overall more consistently useful, and it has other applications as well.
Hey, the rare new DLC contender, because Byleth is in the picture now. If that big moves analysis video was made today, it would definitely have to include a mirror, because that thing is the textbook example of a big, slow, impractical tool that gets essentially no competitive use. It does definitely have strengths over Skewer, it's a bigger hitbox, it breaks shields, it's got super armor, you can drop through platforms with it. And on top of that, Skewer was actually nerfed after this video came out, which is kind of hilarious. It was mainly done to fix a doubles and free-for-all exploit like Berry Infinites and stuff like that, which don't actually matter at all for this list. This is purely a singles-focused list, but they did this by coding Skewer to be classified as a grab, and because Ultimate has protection from chain grabs built into it, this means you can no longer, for example, down throw and hard read into a Skewer anymore. It's not a particularly significant nerf, very few people were going to get caught by that anymore, but it is a nerf. As funny as that is though, I think I'm still giving it to Amir over Skewer because like platform tech chases into Skewer are still more practical than I think anything Byleth can really do.
And as we end this video on the recovery special slot, we end this video without a recovery special. Jigglypuff's Sing works fine in the context of her kit, but exclusively here due to her unique combination of many jumps and extreme airspeed. There's a reason that not a single other character has an up special designed in this way. Now, admittedly, this decision is partially an artifact of the selection criteria chosen for this video. Any methodology is going to distort results one way or another. I believe overall that Judgment in a Vacuum is the most objective way to evaluate an attack, though, and given this criteria and the fact that Sing is a niche move to begin with, it clearly takes the title.
Obviously, this still holds up. None of the new DLC characters had designs similar to Jigglypuff. If I wanted to pick like an actual proper recovery move as a runner-up, which I guess also excludes Yoshi, then I think I would go with Kirby. As a recovery move, it's just terrible, very short range and leaves you really vulnerable. Obviously, it's better for pure recovery than something like Little Max, but if you've got like good air physics or a decent side special, that's probably not the end of the world for you to be stuck with Little Max up B. And it also doesn't really have any of the benefits that other similar vulnerable recovery moves have. It's not very fast, it's not very strong, just inexplicably bad and has been for a really long time. I obviously also still do like the in a vacuum approach compared to in context, because if you judge moves in context, it obviously heavily biases things towards top tiers. A comment I've gotten quite a few times on that older video, and to some degree still get today, is something along the lines of like, what's the point of judging moves in a vacuum? What does doing this accomplish? And I just kind of find the question confusing. What's the point of tier lists? What's the point of game retrospectives? The point of them is that people like watching them. All right, and that's as far as the moves in the original 2019 video went. As I said though, like with the revamped Best of Every Smash Ultimate Move video, let's look at a few more categories. For input move, I think the worst one is pretty clearly Piranha Plant. Honestly, this is closer to like a taunt or an Easter egg than it is a proper attack, but the criteria for the list is any move that doesn't use a typical input, which is exactly what Piranha Plant's crouching attack does. So here's Piranha Plant's crouching attack. Worst grab, I think I would give to the Belmont. It's frame 10, which makes it the only normal grab that's that slow. For comparison, a fast grab is frame 6. Bowser Jr.'s is another frame slower, but at least that one is kind of pretending to be a tether grab. The Belmonts don't get anything like that. They're just kind of the worst of all worlds. It's not even particularly big to make up for this. For Zair, there aren't any like genuinely bad Zairs in the game, but I think Toon Link probably comes closest. It's short, which puts it in the category worse for neutral, but it also just has a bit less payoff than the other short ones. Not a lot less payoff though. For taunts, the worst of a bad bunch, I'd say it's pretty clearly Greninja's. That move does absolutely nothing. Although if you want to include K. Rool's armored taunt, sure, that's a contender as well, but personally I don't think that counts. And then finally, for Final Smash, I feel like Jigglypuff is kind of the front runner in a lot of people's minds, and that move is definitely not good. But the way I envision Final Smash is kind of integrating into the rest of the list is through the Final Smash meter variant, because again, this list is focused on competitive one-on-one play, and that's about as competitive as you can make Final Smashes. And the meter version of Final Smashes take a heavy knockback nerf, which doesn't really apply to Jigglypuff quite the same way, whereas Sonic's is already a very bad Final Smash, and it's definitely hit by those nerfs as well. It begins life as one of the easiest to avoid Final Smashes with some of the worst payoff, and then you take that payoff and make it even worse? Yeah, considering how iconic and powerful Supersonic is supposed to be, man does that thing suck. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. I know this isn't exactly what everyone was hoping for this video, me included, but hopefully you got something out of it and let me know your thoughts. Updated best of version here, Pokemon video here, and patrons, YouTube members, and Twitch subs get perks like early videos and Discord access. Later, people!